Yeah, can you hear me okay?
There's two. Hi, guys.
Rebecca, can you hear us okay? You can? Oh,
But you can't hear me?
we can't hear you. Rebecca, can you sign out and then log back in again? Try that. I guess there's some earlier problems today with the same issue.
Sarah, I could hear her, but I don't know what you guys are hearing on that end. Can you hear me?
Yep, Valerie, we can hear you okay. Rebecca was going to sign out and then come back on again.
And just FYI, Sarah, the reason why I'm not there is because I traveled and, you know, the COVID directions are kind of unclear. So I'm not planning on attending my meeting tomorrow night either in person. So thanks.
Thank you. Snow.
So Sarah, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Great, thanks.
All right, let's call the June 22nd Assembly meeting to order. Will you join me for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We get a roll call, please.
Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Miss Nelson,
Here.
Mr. Knox,
Here.
Mr. Mosher,
Here.
Miss Hemshu,
Here,
Thank you. Before we get on to correspondence and agenda changes, I want to just mention that, first of all, I'm going to apologize in advance for inexperience. It's been many years since I've done this. But also, we have a really long agenda with lots of pretty complex items on it. So if everybody in the room can try and be as succinct as possible, we can maybe have a shot at getting out of here in time tonight. And I will try and do that myself. So any correspondence or agenda changes? John, did you have something you want to?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to make a quick note or point out one of the items of correspondence here. I know we've been back and forth a lot over this past year on the municipal solid waste issue. And I just wanted to point out that I sent a letter to Republic Services dated June 10th. And in that letter, I talked about our commitment to address the fire risk that's been brought up by Republic Services and their subcontractor AML. And in that, I reiterated that the city and borough of Sitka has been committed to using closed top containers and that we've offered a solution for the use of removable hard top containers to address that risk. You know, they're still pushing for further mechanical compaction beyond the mechanical compaction that we already provide. So in that letter, I provided, or I said that we would commit to additional mechanical compaction under a few terms, and that would be pending assembly approval. There's 6 terms that I listed there, and you can reference those in the letter. But in that letter, I also asked that they respond to those terms by June 16th, so we could have an agenda item tonight for potential approval and moving forward in this. As of today, I have not yet heard back on those terms. Thanks.
All right. Any other agendas or correspondence? All right, on to ceremonial matters. We have a Arbor Day proclamation. Do we have anybody here from the Tree and Landscape Committee? All right. So if I stumble a little bit, I apologize in advance. So from the Office of the Mayor, an Arbor Day proclamation, trees a joy forever. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for planting trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas 2021 is the 149th anniversary of the holiday, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, usually celebrated in Alaska on the 3rd Monday of May. And whereas trees counter the effects of carbon emissions and climate change and are a home for birds and other wild creatures, and wherever planted are a source of joy, beauty, and spiritual renewal. And whereas the vision of the Sitka Tree and Landscape Committee is to support activities which help make Sitka more attractive to visitors and residents. And whereas the Tree and Landscape Committee is committed to furthering the goal of beautifying Sitka with trees and landscape areas. And whereas in observance of Arbor Day, the Sitka Tree and Landscape Committee celebrated beautification and urban tree health by planting cherry trees at the Sitka Fire Hall. Now therefore be it resolved that the Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka, Alaska does hereby proclaim July 4th, 2021 as the 149th anniversary celebration of Arbor Day in Sitka, urges all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and encourages all Sitkans to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Signed on this 22nd day of June, 2021. So Sarah, can I give this for you to give to them? And thank you. All right. So we are on to special reports and government to government and municipal boards and commissions. Is Woody here today or? Okay, if we can go ahead and call him.
Hello.
Hi, Woody. This is the City and Borough of Sitka. This is Jess. I'm calling for the report that you may want to be given?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Assembly members. I wanted to share our two meetings that we had in the month of June 2nd and June 16th. The tribe approved a donation request from Clinton Haida, the Aware for Healing Totem Pole in Juneau. The council approved a resolution increasing the rider capacity on the public transit system. This was on June 6th. On June 16th, the tribe acted on enrollment, acted on committee commissions, the tribal council on designated seats. This was from the government meeting a couple months ago. Authorized the submission of the Beha Indian Housing Authority plan for next year. And let me see, also last, that the tribe approved the donation request from the Sitka Historical Society and Museum for the second annual Old Time 4th of July celebration coming up. Thank you. That's a brief report. Appreciate you allowing me to speak to the Assembly.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay. Any other government to government or school district or anybody like that? Okay. All right. So the Sitka Chamber of Commerce has the Visit Sitka quarterly report. You guys come on up.
Hello, good evening, Assembly. Thank you for having us here again for our quarterly report. My name is Laurie Boysa. I'm the Director of Visit Sitka, and we're here to talk about our third quarter activities. So first, as a reminder to the Assembly, the Sitka Chamber of Commerce was awarded the Convention and Visitor Services contract via an RFP in 2015. And the funding for the contract comes from a transient lodging tax, which is an industry-specific tax collected by the visitor industry and placed in the Visitor Activities Enhancement Fund. On page 3 of the report in your packet, you'll see a chart that shares the amount of the transient lodging tax that's been collected in relationship to the Visit Sitka contract amount. So rather than putting up those slides that we normally do every time, I thought we would just do it this way. So if you have questions, we can talk to those at the end. I also wanted to point out in the packet that you received that in the profit and loss statement report, we have added an additional line at the bottom that shares Visit Sitka's unrestricted revenue, which was a question we received, I believe, at our last report. So mainly I'm here to share the exciting news about the development of our meetings and conventions program. And to get straight to it, I have here with me our Alaska fellow, Maddie Tebby. And Maddie is going to share information about the meetings and conventions program. But let's start first by showing our brand new meetings and conventions inspiration video. I know, just won't let me click on it. Oop. Technical difficulties, 1 moment, please. There we go. Now it's not on the screen now. It's really easy when we were testing it. We lost the Zoom link. Thank you, Grant. Grant is fixing the Zoom. So that 1 minute video was produced last summer. Hello from Sitka, Alaska. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about our community. That's a different video. So someday if you want to hear about our community. Grants in there. Okay, we're back. So you may have recognized all of the talent in that video was actually your friends and neighbors. So you probably recognized at least one person in that video. So that will be on our website. We'll be using it to help people choose to come to Sitka for meetings, their meetings and conventions as we move forward. It was very interesting having a fellow here who was here for meetings and conventions when we had the least meetings and conventions year possibly in history, but it was great because it allowed her to focus on what we needed to do. So I'm going to turn it over to her to talk quickly about the programs that we've developed and the projects that she worked on in the last 10 months.
Thank you. Happy to be here. So the two things that I'll be speaking on today are the web toolkit that I built out on the Visit Sitka website and the Meeting and Conventions magazine that we also developed over the past 9 months. So the first thing I'll touch on is what's up on the screen at the moment. This is the meetings toolkit that we built out. And the idea behind this was that we just wanted kind of a one-stop shop for all the tools that an event planner would need, whether they're from Sitka or from the lower 48, to plan an event in Sitka. So everything on this page are the tools that they would potentially need. So just going through kind of a high overview, we have our services, which is what Visit Sitka provides, an RFP page, which allows them to give us their information and us to connect with them to find out what they need from us. Meeting venues as well throughout town, group lodging, group activities, catering, group transportation, a media library where we have logos, promotional videos, basically marketing tools where they can market their event using our resources. And then we additionally have meeting services that are found in Sitka, as well as different ways to incorporate wellness and social impact into their event. And then at the very top of this page is the Digital Meeting and Convention Planners Guide. And this is the magazine that we developed. Let's go full screen. So this is another tool that they can use to really basically get to know Sitka and the different resources that they have available to them if they did have a meeting here. So just going through this briefly. This is our take on a table of contents for it. We wanted to introduce people who hadn't been to Sitka and kind of give them an overview of what it looks like and what the town is and different facts. So on this page, there's different clickable links that you can use to access different parts of the guide. So we have transportation, shopping, dining, and also lodging and meetings.
So
So we have videos that will pop up throughout this, and these are our planner spotlights. These are different event planners that we've reached out to, and in these videos, they talk about their experience hosting events in Sitka and why other people should do it and how great of a time they had. So these are interspersed throughout this magazine. And then this page is just an introduction into the history and culture of Sitka. And then we additionally have pages like this that are focuses on specific venues like Harrigan Centennial Hall. But we also wanted to drive home the idea that there are also a lot of different types of venues. So we have in hotel as well as small group, remote retreats, high tech, a lot of variety. We
So
also
the
wanted
Alaska
to
Travel Industry Association went.
The Sitka Fine Arts Campus was another venue that we really did want to highlight, as they do have a lot of amenities across the grounds. Sustainability was another thing that we wanted to focus on as it's becoming more and more important. So we do have a page dedicated to how to make your meeting sustainable, specifically in Sitka. Then we have quite a bit on lodging around town. So that includes hotels, as well as different things like lodging, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, and camping. And then these two pages, we really wanted to drive home the idea that Sitka is a year-round destination. So whether you wanted to have an event here in the spring, that's great, or the winter, also fantastic. Basically, regardless of the dark or the snow or the cold, we would be happy to have anyone up for an event year round. So we just really wanted to drive home the idea that we're never really closed.
Southeast Conference.
This is a page focused on meeting activities and adventures. So things you can do pre-meetings, post-meetings, fishing, golfing, the works, everything that everyone loves to do around town. And just to give everyone an idea of what one of these videos is, I'll let Robert Venables from Southeast Conference speak a bit about his experience here in Sitka.
Recently had one of the most successful conferences hosted in Sitka at the Harrigan Hall, which has been recently renovated and easily accommodated our over 300 attendees. And the facility itself really lent itself well for the catering needs, the trade show needs, the exhibits, the speakers, the panels. Every facet was just well laid out and flowed very, very well. But what really made it successful was all of the advanced work that went on behind the scenes with Visit Sitka, the Chamber of Commerce, the local community, from the local government and other businesses really pitched in and did a lot of advanced planning to make sure that this happened, in a way that really was a win-win for the community and for our members. We went and did
So that's just one example of one of the videos we had where we just kind of got an outside perspective on someone that hosted an event in Sitka. Then moving forward, we just focused on catering as well, in addition to the different places that you could dine around town, restaurants, as well as cafes and local seafood, everything that people are looking forward to when they come to town. Additionally, we have a page on shopping, as a lot of people are always looking for souvenirs as well as gifts to give out to event attendees, as well as different places around town that people usually end up needing when they're hosting an event. So that's anything from catering to floral arrangements to bulk shopping to electronic stores, everything like that. And then the transportation page for this, we really wanted to drive home the idea that while Sitka is on a remote island in Alaska, it's a lot closer than you think. And there's a lot of different ways that you can get around town. So this is everything from coach buses, if you have a big group, to taxis, to rental cars. We just wanted to really drive home the idea that it's very accessible. And then this is towards the end, this Be Our Guest page connects back to that website toolkit that I talked about earlier. And there are many links throughout this guide that link back to that toolkit. So they do kind of go hand in hand, acting as tools for each other, basically. And then we just have a bit about Visit Sitka and the chamber. And then at the very end, we just have a directory listing that gives basically a rundown of all the different businesses and organizations that can provide more event resources for planners. And yes, as Lori just mentioned, they are clickable like a lot of things throughout the guide are. And that's the magazine. And thank you so much for listening.
So that's our report for the third quarter. And if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them.
Looks like a pretty nice setup there for somebody to plan.
The magazine there is actually virtual, so it's a digital magazine. We don't have any printed versions of it, though. We're looking into if somebody really wanted to have a printed version of it, what that would mean. This is actually hosted on a platform that can transfer digital into print if someone wants to do that. We thought it would be for the planners, they really just need those digital tools. So that's what the choice we made was to save the money and to go digital.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good. The only thing I would say is I like your focus on year-round visiting and focusing on possible organizations, large or small, that making it more accessible and real to them. I think that's good work. Thank you.
Thanks. Great. Thank you.
All right, moving on. Next, we have persons to be heard. Public participation on any item off the agenda not to exceed 3 minutes. Good.
Good evening, Richard Ween. I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree that lifts its leafy arms to pray. A tree that looks at God all day and lifts its leafy arms to pray. That was the beginning of a poem by Joyce Kilmer, and we had to memorize it in school. I appreciate Arbor Day and love trees. That's why I'm in the Tongass forest. But I was hoping that next year, some people would lift their leafy arms and make a proclamation for Memorial Day, etc. So happy Arbor Day. Happy Father's Day, happy Flag Day, and happy summer. I also like to report that they're no longer going to be enforcing the mask rule on boats. And if you think about who actually came on commercial fishing boats, if you actually think about who came up with that idea, you have to realize they are so disconnected from reality that it's amazing. So I think it is wonderful that they're finally recognizing it. And though it has not been rescinded, it's not going to be enforced. Another example of the crazy train. A concept that I'd like to give you today is what's called over-tourism. Something about over-tourism that is being felt across the world, not including this pandemic year, but places like Venice, which only has a population of 60,000, receives 3 million visitors a year. And basically it's all by ship. And they are going to try to do something because it is detrimental to the city. There's Paris. They get 76,000 visitors a day and just try to go see the Mona Lisa. There's Barcelona, which receives 9 million people. There's Croatia. There is Ipanema Beach in Rio de Janeiro. There's Bali. There's Amsterdam. And believe it or not, in Iceland and Greece, they're going to be instituting caps. Part of the problem is that it causes over tourism causes a rise in prices, especially in short-term rentals. And actually, in some of these places, people are having to leave. 8% of global greenhouse emissions are caused by the travel industry, mostly due to the transportation aspect. There are 4 aspects of problems and over tourism, and that's overcrowding, pollution and waste, bad behavior, and rising prices. And I think that we need to, again, be very wary in Sitka of making sure that we give whoever comes here the best experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Rachel Roy, the director of the Greater Sitka Chamber of Commerce. I just have a quick update. I could have just had it easy today by letting these guys do all the work, but I wanted to give an update on the Sleeves Up for Summer program that is funded through the Department of Health and Social Services and the Alaska Chamber. The Sitka Chamber received $45,000 and we were just approved for another $25,000 to help support incentives to get the remaining estimated about 30% of our community vaccinated. We're not trying to talk anyone in fact getting vaccinated that's not interested, but it's just an incentive and a thank you to go and get that schedule made and get in to get that appointment. We had our first 2 pop-up clinics in conjunction with Search and with White's Pharmacy this last week, and it was really, really positive, and I think it really lightened the mood of everyone to be able to come in and get that gift card. We spent about $25,000 locally on $50 gift cards. And so we have lots more to give and we'll be investing more out into the community. I think it was a really special checks to write when we're writing $500,000 and $700,000 to these small businesses that they're going to get into hands of our community members that then can spend local and really shop locally. We had about 100 people vaccinated during these clinics, and 30 of them brought their friends. So if you bring a friend, if you've already been vaccinated, we're offering an opportunity to get into a drawing for $1,000 shopping spree or gift card. This last week, we had a Coast Guard family win, and they're going to use that money for a Hames Center certificate so that they can have access for their family into the Hames Center this summer. And so really special. It's getting right into that nonprofit and then also providing them with a great place to be active this summer. So I encourage you, if you have a friend or a child or someone in town that isn't vaccinated yet, come in and join the others in that drawing. We're doing those weekly. And so we'll do another one this Friday. Also, we're hosting the 4th of July parade. So last year I was here going, I'm really sorry, we're not hosting a 4th of July parade. And so I'm really thankful that we're able to do that this year. And thank you to the city and the police department for helping us coordinate that effort. We are putting together a schedule of events and we're hoping to have everyone's events in by Monday so that we can put that out to the media. There's lots of events that are happening and we just want to, we always provide that comprehensive schedule. And the parade will be at 1 o'clock. So look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item A, minutes from the June 8th assembly meeting, and B, accepting coronavirus state and local federal recovery funds award to non-entitlement units of local government and for the Alaska Department of Commerce, Community and Economic Development.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comment?
Richard Ween. As far as item A go, the creating minutes are an art. And I think last meeting was the first time that I had seen the assistant clerk, Jessica Earnshaw, at the helm. And I just like to, recognize her. And I know that Sarah has just done an outstanding job, and she, meaning Jessica, has a wonderful teacher there for her. As far as item B goes, clearly we want to accept the coronavirus state and local recovery funds, but I do think for the record that it would be nice to have a memo so that people who want to go back or who couldn't attend the meeting would have at least a paragraph as to what this is. Sometimes a topic sentence says it all, but we're talking about legal records here, and I think a memo would have been appropriate. Thank you.
Any other comment? Okay, Sarah? Or, sorry, Jess.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Ms. Hempshute, Ms. Hempshute, Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes. Okay,
motion passes 5-0.
okay. All right, moving on to boards and commission appointments. Can I get a
I
motion?
move to reappoint Roberta Littlefield to a 3-year term on the Historic Preservation Commission in the category of at-large, and Ann Zanumski to a 3-year term on the Local Emergency Planning Committee under category 4 community groups.
Second.
Any comments? Madam?
I certainly support the nomination of Roberta Littlefield. She is a gift to this town in her knowledge. I'd also like to mention her wonderful husband, and may he rest in peace. I think that Roberta has contributed significantly in many ways, especially culturally here in town, running the Dog Point camp, being an ever-ready individual on the preservation team, on the historic preservation team. So she is, I think, amazing that she would step up again, and it's much appreciated. Amy Zanazowski has been in Sitka since 2009. She has been with Sitka Counseling and has been on the LEPC for at least as long as I can remember. And she's a very solid citizen. So I'm very happy that people are re-upping because it hopefully shows a commitment and confidence in this town. So thank you both for doing a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, back to the table. We just thank both folks for being willing to give their time again. Jess?
Ms. Hempshute,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
motion passes 5-0.
On to unfinished business, item D.
I move to postpone ordinance 2021-15A on first reading as amended to the July 27th assembly meeting.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to postpone this. Any public comment? Up.
Richard Lean. I think the idea to postpone was probably something that should have been done at the last meeting, but I'm very happy that review of this particular ordinance now has the postponement. And hopefully when it goes back to the table, they will be able to craft something a lot better, especially as it relates to the reality of enforcement, et cetera. So thank you for that postponement motion.
Any further comment? Okay. Does anybody from the assembly wish to speak to the postponement?
I'll just mention the reason why I did that was I found out that the staff, city staff was interested in reworking that. I was relieved to hear that. Something about it just, I knew it needed improvement. And so I'm very happy about that. And I'm glad they'll be making some adjustments.
Okay. Anybody else? Jess, I said it right this time.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Hemshute,
Yes.
Mr. Knox.
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
motion passes 5-0.
Okay, we're on to item E. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 2021-12 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021 potable water to Gary Paxton Industrial Park Dock.
Second.
Okay, any comment? One up. Oh, hold on a sec, Dr. Ween, if you would. Before we start comments and things, I forgot, John, we were going to ask John to kind of give us an update on what we're doing this for. Since I don't think, or Gary's here if he wants. Gary, whichever between the two of you.
I'm comfortable. If Gary, you can
Just
come
to
up if I miss
kind of
something.
give us an explanation.
Yeah, it's right now we have a water line that runs, basically it's just a jumper line that goes from our fresh water over to the dock, and we're looking for a $25,000 appropriation from the GPIP fund to put in a permanent freshwater or potable water line over to serve the dock and the customers.
All right, now, Dr. Ween.
Richard Ween. Thank you for that explanation. I do feel still a little puzzled. I know you're putting in a water line, and there was some discussion at the last meeting. I still don't know the diameter of the piping and how the end spigots and so forth will be available for various size tubing and what the flows are and so forth. So I just feel that it would be nice to have that kind of explanation, because it would allow the public to know what the utility is and also the limitations of it. It was mentioned last time about a cruise ship. That's a pretty much lots of water, and that would require a much greater diameter. So the parameters for this, I think, are laudable, but I think a little more detail for the public would be terrific. Thank you.
Anything else from the public? Back to the assembly. Okay. Not seeing any comment. Jess?
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Ms. Hemshute,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes. Okay. On to item F.
I move to approve ordinance 2021-13 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021 Brady Lift Station emergency repair.
Okay.
Second.
And as before, I thought we'd give John a chance to explain this a little bit before we took comment.
Absolutely. Thanks. If you don't mind, could I ask Shiloh to come up and just give a quick update? She's been deeply involved with the Brady Lift Station project and the emergency repair we've had over there.
Hi, Shyla Williams, Environmental Superintendent. So this lift station is scheduled to be replaced with a construction window starting in September. We were getting prepared for that work last month when it was discovered that when the lift station pumps turn on, small amounts of sewage were discharging onto the beach from the riprap. You wouldn't know it if you weren't right down there working in that location. And so we had been putting this bypass in place just in case the lift station were to fail between April and September when our construction window is allowed. And so we were able to put temporary bypass pumps in place and pump the sewage in a temporary line that runs above, in the tidelands there over to the Thompson Harbor lift station. We have been having troubles with our bypass pumps getting clogged with wipes and other, things that clog pipes or clog pumps. And so this appropriation is if we need to go in and make a repair before we can actually get the lift station replaced in September. We want to try to avoid discharging sewage onto the beach as much as possible. We did try to go in and make the repair. We were having pump problems. The repair didn't go quite as planned. The lift station sits in a real precarious position there on the shoreline, and the contractor was struggling to secure the shoreline and not compromise the infrastructure that is the lift station infrastructure, as well as the temporary bypass pumps and piping array that we have up above. We are currently back on a bypass pumping system right now, so we are not discharging sewage onto the beach, but this money would be there to help us in the event that we do need to take some other measures to stop the discharge of sewage onto the beach.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. All right. Any public comment on this? Go ahead.
Good evening, Richard Ween. It was nice to see Shyla Williams. It's been a long time. I'm sure she's happy that she doesn't have to come here very often. The Brady lift station is an example of infrastructure that fails. And when we have all this delayed maintenance in 200 million, I don't know, it's a lot of money worth of delayed infrastructure, we can see what can potentially happen. This is a lift station which services Halibut Point Road, meaning everything up and down it, and it is very important. And that little bit of sewage was apparently estimated at 11,000 gallons, which is quite a bit. Clearly we need it. But this is, again, a point that we have to watch our delayed maintenance structure and really get a focus on that. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public? Okay, back to the assembly. Yep.
I don't know, John, if you can answer this question or if we want to have Shiloh come back up again, but can we speak to the construction window and if there's any opportunity to begin, work on this? Because it's a failed station or a failed piece of infrastructure. It seems like we might have some latitude to be able to start working on it now rather than continue to Band-Aid things, or is it pretty hard and fast that we can't get in there?
It's, I wouldn't say it's hard and fast, but that's an area that we do not have. We lease that property, but there's not an easement there for us to access that regularly like we do in many of our other areas. There's a hardware store there, and to access that infrastructure, we need to use their parking lot. This is one of their busiest times of the year. So our construction window was originally set to start in September when business is slower. And if we were to basically take over their parking lot, we've got some business interruption issues that we'd have to address. So by putting in this bypass, we're able to control it until we hit that construction window. Plus the contractor is busy on other projects too, so we don't have full availability to them either. So this was pretty much the best solution we could come up with, where we can access from the tidelands, allow the business to continue to operate and keep a temporary solution in place until construction kicks off in September.
Anybody else? Seeing none, Jess?
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Hemshute. Ms. Hemshute. Can we get a thumbs up? Okay, thank you. Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Knox.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on to new business, item G.
I move to approve proposing an amendment. Sorry, I didn't have this pulled up. Just make sure.
What's that?
I move to approve ordinance 2021-14 on first reading, proposing to amend Title IV Revenue and Finance of the Sitka General Code by adding a new chapter 4.27 excise tax on motor fuel to establish an excise tax on motor fuel sold, transferred, or used in the city and borough of Sitka, providing for administration of collecting the tax and providing for penalties for failure to pay taxes due and submitting the question of such an amendment to the qualified voters of the regular election on October 5th, 2021.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do the sponsors want to give a brief overview before we start taking comment?
I'm fine just taking comment. I think we provided quite a bit of information in the
Okay.
memo that we provided. And then just kind of moving there from
Okay. I just
comment from public and questions. I'm fine with that.
Just want to give you the chance. Okay, so anybody from the public wish to speak to? Oh, wait. Oh, no.
It's fine.
In favor of this proposition. It should have happened a long, long time ago. I've been advocating this for years and I haven't had any results. It's the fairest way to pay for the road maintenance. It's the fairest tax because the heavier your vehicle, the more damage you do to the road and the more you have to pay for fuel. And the more miles you drive, the more damage you do to the roads. So you pay more taxes to help preserve the roads. And the public shouldn't be subsidizing the oil companies by building and maintaining roads for their customers. So I feel this should have happened a long time ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else need to, Dr. Wing?
Richard Ween. This ordinance allows for 3 cents per gallon for marine and motor fuels. It is interesting that, for example, Alaska has 8 cents for regular gasoline, refined fuels, Marine is 5 cents. Aviation is 4.7 cents. Jet fuel is 3.2 cents. And there's a general surcharge of 0.95 cents. And that's at the state. Of interest, if you look at the state's 2020 budget, they received, not budget, but revenues from motor fuel tax, they received $6.9 million. Now, that can easily be calculated from what their charges were approximately to get the number of gallons that were sold. As part of the memo and analysis, it was stated that they could not, in the memo, that they couldn't figure out what the amount of money was spent, that there were many models. I certainly would have liked to have heard what the approximate estimates were to bring in, what that would bring in, which would give an idea overall of how much fuel Sitka uses. If people are going to remit, there's a certain amount of money that comes in, and you can make certain very real assumptions as to how many gallons were sold, et cetera. Even though they may not have to report certain things, the very fact that they have to put in a tax helps you figure that out. So I can't figure out why it was not shared with us, one of the many models as far as how much it would bring in. And you know what would also happen? If you had the amount of miles that the amount of gallons that were sold as an average, we can then assume a new tax on electric cars because they utilize the infrastructure as well. And based on that usage, they can have a small surcharge, for their usage based on this increase. And I would like to address the notion that, yes, the use of a road causes wear and we have to pay for it, or the state does. But again, anyone who's driven down the Pennsylvania Turnpike knows that trucks have to weigh. The key here is that the weight, at least in Sitka, probably has more to do with wear and tear than just the mere driving, since there's nowhere to go. And therefore, I think a weight part should be put in, especially for things like overweighted vehicles like Alaska Coach, which just zip up and down, as we can all remember before COVID. So that is wear and tear, but yet they're only paying the 3 cents just to fill their tank, but yet their weight is something very significant. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to this?
Hi, I'm Chris Gestad. I'm on the Port and Harbors Commission. I've actually helped Kevin with this for the last couple of years. As we know, our harbor rates are going up at 5 to 6% for the foreseeable future, mainly for the rebuilding of Eliason and Sealing Cove. We've looked at different options of raising revenue. One option before I got on the commission was raising the raw fish tax 3%, and that was pretty well shot down in a big way. This was an idea that came about, and I started kind of running with it, and I not pulled, but I went and spoke to a lot of my fellow fishermen and actual businesses around Sitka. I concentrated on marine, but I did actually talk to some of contractors and trucking businesses in Sitka as well. At first, when you first say, let's add another tax, it's obviously a little bit of a whoa. But as I explained it and talked more about it, in general, people were for it. I asked my fellow fishermen and business owners to run the math. I asked them to compare how many gallons that they would burn on a yearly basis, 3 cents per gallon, and compare that to what their harbor rates would be doing at a 5 to 6% increase for the foreseeable future into the 2030s. And after I explained that, most people accepted that they would rather see this fuels tax. I think the fuel tax is pretty fair. We're spreading the load through all harbor users, whether you're trailering a boat and launching at a launch ramp, or you're in a permanent stall like I am. Hopefully we'd be getting some more revenue from transient vessels, tenders, cruise ships, maybe. I mean, just trying to help spread the load for the harbor system. Obviously, I do have some reservations. I see some downfalls and some scary things. I'm worried that we could make our fuel vendors less competitive in the marketplace. I don't know if 3 cents is enough to make them less competitive, but it is a concern of mine, and I think it's something worth considering. What I do like about this is being put to the people. It's not just voted at this body. So I think it's something worth looking into, talking about, and putting forward to the people of Sitka and let them make the final decision. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to this? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the assembly. Kevin,
I'll go.
the other Kevin.
Yeah, I will commend the sponsors. It looks like you did a lot of homework, and it looks like a good product. I do have a variety of concerns. I'm surprised that we haven't heard more comments from the public for or against. We did get an email just about an hour before the meeting from a representative of one of the companies, the fuel companies. And so I would just like to ask a couple questions. And so I agree with you. I think it's great to bring this to the public, but in my mind, my concerns that I have, unless they're alleviated, when you bring something to a public vote, that's really hard to change. So if it's not done really well, then we have a bad product, even if it's voted, and it's hard to change. So some of my questions here are the accounting and for this on the city level, and as far as how it will affect businesses affected. Have the sponsors consulted with the city staff at all to talk about this?
As far as the questions that were brought forward by the email? Is that?
Yeah, and I had those
we
questions.
did just get it. I mean, I did share it with the administrator and he shared it with staff, but we haven't had a chance to really have a dialogue about it yet. And it's not enough time, of course, but you know, that's part of the reason why we have 2 readings for this too. So we do have some time to dive into it. I do have a few answers to some of the questions that he asked.
Okay.
If you know,
okay,
if you want me to dive into those, or we can wait until later.
Not right now, but I mean, right now, at this very moment, if I had to vote, I would vote yes, just to move to next reading. But I would, unless some of my concerns can be alleviated, I don't know if I could vote yes on the next one. So yeah, the accounting, and have you talked to the stakeholders, not just people who drive vehicles, but the fuel companies, Petro, West Marine, and maybe even the barge company that Sampson that fuels their tugs here and on their trip. Have you consulted with them on how this might affect them or any concerns they may have? Have you talked to any of those representatives?
Over the years, they have been approached, but in general, there wasn't a lot of dialogue that happened because it's kind of a bit of a non-starter with some. So I mean, this, like I kind of outlined in the memo, and we've talked about quite a bit at the commission level over. I can't remember exactly when this first came up, but it's been a topic of conversation there for quite some time. There have been some dialogue back and forth, but nothing really official.
Okay. Okay. So like that is a concern of mine, that the major stakeholders, I mean, I think it's not going to really have a huge effect on the average driver, and I understand that we do, I agree, we need to pay for the roads. They're falling apart. And so I appreciate this. I mean, I didn't have what it took to start this, but I think it's good to work on it. Okay, so also the breakdown of costs, yeah, the email also mentions that breakdown, but I was going to ask that as well before we even got the email. It would have been nice to have in the packet the breakdown of all, because we're adding 3 cents, but we also have a 6% sales tax and all these ones listed on this email. Federal fuel excise tax, state fuel excise tax, federal lust tax, Alaska state refined fuel tax, OLST tax, whatever that is. It would be nice. I would like to see in the next memo, like if this passes, to see a little more information on that. It just feels like a little more work needs to be done. I would have preferred if we had had a discussion direction the meeting before to kind of get people, you know, thinking about it and get more public input. People, and not just because of one email we got, people have been mentioning when I've talked to them about the electrical vehicles, and I think it's wonderful that they're growing. I foresee a day when most vehicles in Sitka are electrical because the companies are diving into that, and this is a good thing. And I realize that if an electric vehicle is charging electricity, that's revenue to the city, but it's not dedicated specifically for the roads. One of my concerns on this is that I mean, every time I turn around now, there's an electric vehicle. And that's good. I'm waiting for the pickups to come down the line because I would consider purchasing one of those. But in a few years, I think shorter than we think, there may be the majority of vehicles electric, and we won't even be taxing them for that, for the roads. So have you, and I know I thought about it, I thought a lot about this weekend. It was just like all I thought about. It's a very hard decision. I don't even know of a way off the top of my head to figure out how much electricity they're using to tax on that, but it's a concern. And it wasn't mentioned in the memo at all, or any further efforts in the future to investigate the possibility of working on another thing. The thing is, I mean, it's good that, sorry for taking up so much time, it's great that this is going to the people, but the point is, if you put it to the vote and it goes in there, it is going to be hard to fix or add to. So I would like to see in the future some sort of way to tax the electrical vehicles because they are growing. They are going to be the norm fairly soon. So having said all that, I'm going to see what other members say, but I'm planning on voting yes because we don't even have a full assembly. So if Ms. Nelson were to vote no, you know, I could effectively kill this, and I feel like that wouldn't be fair.
Actually, that's not true.
Oh, it isn't?
On first reading, it takes 4 votes to kill it.
Oh, okay. So I guess it doesn't matter then. I'll still vote yes because I feel like we need to have the full assembly on. But I have those concerns, and I would really hope and appreciate it if you would, you know, perhaps do some research and address some
I
of
see
these.
you there, Valerie.
Thank you.
Valerie?
I'm all in favor of asking the voters their opinion on things. And I tried to get the sale of Sitka Community Hospital. I tried to get people to email me back. They don't. And kudos to Mr. Knox and Ms. Himshoot for putting this to the voters. I will vote yes on this first reading, but I still want more information. And I probably will vote no in the polls because this type of tax is inflationary, as a previous administrator emailed all of us. And it's going to put price pressure on every consumer item that is carried in a vehicle, starting with the trucks that haul our goods from the barge docks into town, and on and on and on. We now have the $12,000 sales tax cap. So if you add this 3 cents on to fuels, it's just as easy for those boats to go to Juneau or Petersburg or Wrangell and fuel up. And guess what? Then you lose a heck of a lot more. And I'm not sure this is the answer. Thank you.
Rebecca, did you have anything? Or I thought I saw your hand up.
Guys, we're not asking for the assembly to pass or not pass a tax. We're asking them to pass or not pass a ballot question. So And everybody before this eventually recognized that that's what we're looking for. So, and I'll defer to Kevin if he wants to speak to any other items.
And I'd be happy to answer some of the questions that the email that we received, some of the ones that I can anyway, and I would defer to staff if, I don't know, if Melissa can speak to any of the questions that we got regarding where the tax gets implemented, or, you know, at what point of the sale anyway. But some of the things that have come up of concerns or the additional information that we're looking for. Just to put a little background on developing this took quite a while for us to put together just in concept. It wasn't, you know, certainly wasn't slapped together. It was many months in the making and revising and trying to get it to its final form. It took a lot of work to get there, and the research around that we did and for the memo also took us some time. It doesn't take a lot to figure out some of the other issues or the other questions that come up. I mean, we could expand on this memo if that's the desire of the members. I'd be happy to try to find some additional information. If you want to send me questions or whatever, I'd be happy to try to do some research for you. But some of the things that were brought up around how we decided which fuels were going to be taxed or not. A question was brought up, why, if it's motor fuels, why isn't aviation being taxed? Rebecca and I made the decision in putting this together that we weren't going to include aviation because it didn't have a real direct line funding mechanism where we're directing revenues to aviation related infrastructure, because Sitka only owns the airport terminal and the seaplane base. If general aviation, wheeled planes or Guardian flight or, other, charter flights or others that come into town that don't use any of those pieces of infrastructure, their question is going to be, where's my tax revenue going then if it's not going towards things that I would actually use? We wanted to keep it because the other two, the marine fuels and the road fuels, go directly towards exactly what those users would benefit from. We felt like it was just really clean that way. So that's what part of the reason why we didn't add it. One of the other questions was, as far as the state revenue is concerned, that's collected from the state per gallon and percentage taxes for roads, road fuels, heating fuels, and marine fuels. No, they don't come back to the city unless they come back in the form of, for like road fuels, state roads or state facilities. We don't revenue share with the state. Aviation fuel is the exception to that. We do receive some monies back from all aviation fuels back to municipal owned aviation related structures. So we get some money from the state to help operate our seaplane base and the Baranof Warm Springs seaplane base. Those are the only two places that we get revenue share from any fuel tax from the state. There was another question that that the email addressed that I feel like was a good look at what we're trying to do here. It had to do with how the tax is implemented. Is it charged before city sales tax is charged? And that's a question that I would have to kick back to Melissa or staff about how it ends up getting implemented. They're best going to know how it either gets stacked or it's just an add-on. And then also the one other question that he had that I think I have a reasonably confident answer on is, would this be applied to LPG or propane? And that answer would be no, because it doesn't fall into the motor fuel road fuel kind of category, I guess. Melissa, do you have an answer to the question of how this gets applied and in
I
what
don't think it
order?
would, because at the wholesale level, we don't charge sales tax. So if you're charging it at the
I
wholesale
guess
level.
their argument is if we're paying, or if we're charging it at the wholesale level, they're turning around and charging that same price to the consumer, and then the consumer is paying 6% on top of that. Because this is a per gallon, ours is a price base.
Yeah, and I think a good example is our tobacco excise tax. So that's at the wholesale level. So then the wholesaler, when they sell retail, essentially that tax is being passed on. The way that this tax is written, I believe that in some cases, it's going to be at the point of resale. Some cases, it's going to be at the wholesale level. It's per gallon, but if the final sale ends up passing that on as part of it, so if it's at the wholesale level, then it could be passed on in a similar way that the tobacco excise tax is.
Since she's up here, ask a question. So do you see, have you read this ordinance?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Do you see any difficulties on your end administering this?
I think the challenges that we'll have will be, it's not necessarily something that, our existing software is going to be able to incorporate. So there's challenges, they're not overwhelming. But it's certainly something that will take some work and more resources to administer.
Okay. Thank you.
Rebecca?
My question isn't for Melissa, sorry.
But did you have a comment you want to make or something?
Yeah, I did have a comment. I wanted to address the question of EVs, and it's a good problem for Sitka to have if we have an increasing number of EVs. And so I think in their own way, EVs do contribute back to the community by hopefully helping to keep our rates down for electricity. But if we do start to have, more EVs than gas-powered cars, then I think Kevin's right. Kevin Mosher's right. We need to look at what do we do with that? How do we make sure that those cars are paying their fair share? So I think that's a future question and not unrelated to this, but I would argue that I don't think that's a showstopper for this particular ballot question.
So I usually, as long as it's semi-reasonable, am willing to pass things on to the voters. A couple of almost procedural things. Future assemblies can and probably will, if this passes, make changes I would call logistical changes.
Okay.
And there's no barrier to that, I don't think, politically or realistically, when you're not taking the tax away or anything, but so adding a charge of some sort for electric vehicles, I would say, is clearly within the spirit of it. So if a future assembly wanted to do that, and we've done that on other things, I don't think would be particularly onerous. So, I've got some personal thoughts on this. I doubt boats will spend $1,000 to save $6 on taxes to go to Juneau. But I have no problem passing this tonight, or probably passing it next time to make it to go to the voters. And I frankly don't think it's a little bit of a long shot one, but that's the beauty of going to the voters. And so the folks who think it's a good idea will have to get to work, and otherwise what will happen. And it's kind of nice. We'll still get blamed either way, but it won't really be our call.
So I just wanted to address one other question and the one that Dr. Weenan brought up about making, finding a fiscal impact or fiscal note to this. the challenge is that, you can take state data, and that's really the only place we can get real, unless the vendors give us numbers about, fuel sales or consumption in the city of Sitka. If you take state data, that's the state number. We don't have a great way because the state data is also protected through confidentiality agreements similar to this one. So we can't, it ends up to be a real big guess about, Anchorage might buy so much, and so Sitka could be, somewhere around that. It doesn't really end up computing out because, as you pointed out, we don't really go anywhere when we drive. Our miles are a lot more limited. So we're not driving as much, but also conversely, our fuel economy is a lot worse than places that have highways. So we'd be making really big guesses at it. If you went on the low end, we're probably somewhere around 400 or 4.5 million gallons is, I think, one of the guesses that I heard out there for a low consumption for Sitka on an annual basis. And that would be all fuel types to, over 8. So, I don't really know how we come up with a number unless the vendors really do come forward and tell us how much is being sold.
Thank you.
Anybody? Oh. Did you
It's
want to-
okay. It's okay.
Oh, hi, Brian.
This ballot proposition is by charter mandatory to be brought to the voters. It's not discretionary, it's mandatory. So because in our charter, it requires that issues of sales and use tax be approved by the voters. This is a assembly sponsored proposition that it could have been done by initiative or referendum, but it's done by assembly proposition and must be brought in front of the voters. So if subsequently the rate proposed in this proposition were attempted to be changed or added to, that also would have to be brought to the voters. Now, the provisions of implementation within this ordinance are derived from tried and true ordinances that appear in other municipalities throughout the state of Alaska. And those type of implementation administrative provisions could be changed by this assembly. So I just wanted to make sure that distinction was understood as we go forward.
No, that actually helps. I was going to ask Tor, but you answered, because I was under the assumption that if this went to the voters and then it passed, we really can't do a lot with it. But so from what Brian's saying is we can tweak the assembly if this passed and then the voters passed it, we could tweak some of the administrative portions of it if things needed to be fixed administratively. But as far as making the tax smaller or adding it or whatever, that would have to be approved by a vote.
That's correct.
Okay, and so that was just, like I said, I'm going to vote yes for it. That's just a concern that I have when you have something like that that's kind of hard boiled in there. If something needs to be tweaked, all of a sudden it's a big deal to change it. So,
Anything else? Jess?
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Miss Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Miss Hemshute, Miss Hemshute.
Yes.
The ordinance shall be moved to second reading on July 13th.
Okay, well, we are 20 minutes past the hour, so I didn't want to interrupt in the middle. I was tempted, so let's take 5. Rebecca, you back there? There she is. Okay. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order, and we are all on to item H, I believe.
I move to approve ordinance 2021-17 on first reading, proposing to amend Title IV Revenue and Finance of the Sitka General Code by adding a new subsection to Chapter 4.09 Sales Tax to establish a consumer sales tax on marijuana and marijuana products in addition to the existing consumer sales tax, and amending Chapter 4.25 Student Activities Dedicated Travel Fund such that the tax proceeds be deposited into and dispersed from a fund for extracurricular student activities, and submitting the question of such an amendment to the qualified voters at the regular election on October 5th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, it's been made and seconded. Do the sponsors wish to give an kind of an overview explanation? Either one of you?
I would say that we covered a bunch in the memo provided in the packet. I'll just point out here right off of the bat, other municipalities and boroughs within the state of Alaska that have recorded taxes that are addition to or the only tax on marijuana. In some places that don't have a sales tax, but Anchorage has 5%, the Fairbanks Borough 5%, Juneau 3%, Ketchikan Borough 5%, Matsu Borough 5%.
Anybody from the public wish to speak to this? Come on up.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Michelle Cleaver, and I'm the owner of Weed Dudes here in Sitka. And I wanted to talk about this. I would have loved to have been involved with the putting together of it. It's true that other Alaska cities do have sales taxes, but like Anchorage doesn't have a normal sales tax. So they put a 5% sales tax on marijuana, and that's equal to what it is in Sitka. I have to remind you that we're a heavily taxed industry. We're only 4 years out right now. We've got a 20% state tax on our marijuana products. We've got between a 28 and a 32% federal tax. We're not allowed regular business benefits such as able to use the bank system. In order to pay my taxes, my federal taxes, I have to make a plane trip up to Anchorage, $600 ticket every month to pay my payroll taxes and quarterly to pay my estimated 1040 taxes. I also have to make a plane trip to Seattle monthly to pay my Visa bill and do regular business like that. Being off-road makes it very difficult in Sitka, and the fact that we have to compete with the black market who pay no taxes at all and don't benefit the community at all. They don't have to have their products tested, nor do they have to provide any communities or customer service. One thing that I'm a little annoyed about is that in the analysis, it says that like alcohol and tobacco, marijuana is considered a luxury item. So why aren't we taxing? I mean, I do understand that we need to figure out how to get the kids to school, to dealing with all the activity funds. But I would think that you could spread it around and use alcohol and tobacco. I know that I've lived in Sitka since 1986, and I quit smoking in the early 90s when the city put an excise tax, which took cigarettes from $2 a pack to almost $6 a pack. And that's when I quit. And I know that the money from that went to Sitka Community Hospital. Well, Sitka Community Hospital is not there anymore, and we're not using that excise tax to help people's health.
what are we using that tax for? I kind of heard what we're using it for, and it's a little disappointing. Why can't we spread this around? Why can't we tax maybe 2.5% to marijuana, 2.5% to alcohol, and 2.5% to cigarettes, or at least take 2.5%? I know it's paying off, but I was hoping maybe we could rework some of the things. It is a tax initiative to go to the voters, but I don't think it's going to pass unless you make it more reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to this? Wayne?
Good evening, Richard Ween here. This is a tax on marijuana, and it's 5% per ounce, or if for all of the marijuana related things. I'd like to point out that in the memo, it had mentioned that this is almost like a sin tax. If we have this tax, one of the justifications is it'll keep it out of the hands of the little ones. Well, we had a vote in Sitka, and 70% of the populace voted for it. I didn't vote for it, but the bottom line is that we had the opportunity to make it much more difficult to obtain and not allow it here. But that being said, I'm very happy that it's in the hands of Michelle Cleaver, who's a very responsible, wonderful individual. The other thing that was not in the memo was the amount that it would bring in, but yet I read on KCAW this afternoon that it would bring in about $200,000. So my question also was not in the memo is how much does the Sitka School District spend on extracurricular activities, which would put this in perspective. Is $200,000 a lot? I don't know how many kids have been denied and what are their expenses yearly, which I think is something that the voters need to know before they go. And one of the things is that the state charges $50 charge an ounce for bud and flower. And I can go through the entire list, but they really charge them up and down. But the interesting thing is that I remember the prior conversations we had at the table where this has the potential to increase the illicit market. And so, the more you make this cost retail, the more the growers are. And I know a few growers, and they, hey, as Michelle said, they're not going through all the hoops that she has to go through. But here's another interesting thing. Marijuana is therapeutic. People take it as a medicinal purpose, whether it is CBD or other products. So my notion is, are you going to be charging for penicillin next? And I know you think it sounds silly, but cannabis has been used in a variety of treatments and so forth. So in essence, you are taxing healthcare as well. And I don't think you even know how much is used for medicinal purposes. So, hey, tax away.
Anybody else from the public? Bring it back to the table.
Just to address a couple of things here. First, the idea of taxing and spreading out the burden or the kind of diversifying the revenue or whatever, however you want to see it there. The tobacco tax is in our charter. It's something that wouldn't be changeable by us. It would have to be changed by the voters as well. It does go to the Sitka Community Hospital Fund and is used to pay for the pension liability that we have there. So that entire amount is already being used. Alcohol, where actually the state specifically prohibits or preempts municipalities from taxing alcohol at a higher rate. So we don't have that option. As far as one of the things that I had thought about within a tax structure like this on this product, I do recognize that there are medicinal uses for marijuana by certain users. This particular tax does not affect CBD. It's only on other products as defined by the state as a marijuana product, and CBD doesn't fall under that category. So the revenue projection or the fiscal projection that we have here is again a bit of a guess. It's a little bit of it's a much better educated guess than we had for the fuel tax. But the amount that we were projecting, which is in the memo at $200,000, is a bit, we think a pretty good estimate as far as how much the district needs or projects in their need for activities, because we are proposing that the activity fund be changed from a travel activity fund to just an activity fund, so that it can encompass more of the fees and the burden, I guess, to our students and our families. That 200,000 would go a long ways, and it's something that Rebecca and I have talked, not necessarily in the memo, but to media and then also publicly. One of the a really large burden that our businesses in Sitka very generously step up to is the fundraising that a lot of our activities really need to do in order to be able to travel, to be able to participate locally and statewide. Right now, the activities fund funds about, for the high school, about $6,000 per activity. It depends on how big the team is or the participation level is for any one of those activities, but they end up getting that 6,000 and then having to go out and raise an additional $4,000 to $12,000 more. Some teams even more than that, in order to be able to compete or travel and do the activities that they would like to be able to do. One of the great things that we see here in Sitka is our high level of competitiveness, I guess, within the state. And we see a lot of kids get the opportunity to go and show, what a great little town we have here, what, fabulous, participation we have within our sports, drama debate, all the different activities that we have within the Sitka School District, and then outside of that as well. So it's absolutely commendable what our business community puts up, but we also know that they are extremely stressed from it too. So this proposal is meant to help kind of defray some of that cost. When we looked at the current sales tax revenue that this industry brings in, I was a little bit surprised about the number that we saw. And I can lean on Melissa Haley again to speak more to it, but I think it's a reasonable proposal, and it's something that I would like to see go in front of the voters.
Anybody else? Like other Kevin? Sorry, go ahead. Valerie?
I don't think it's reasonable. I think maybe 3% is reasonable. And I do have a question on a statement that was made by an assembly member that the state prohibits communities from letting us tax alcohol more. I just came back from Juneau, and guess what? I went to Costco, I bought some wine. There's a 5% tax rate. That's their city sales tax rate. There's a 3% tax rate. That's an extra alcohol tax. They also have it in Anchorage. And so I can't vote for this to go to the voters this way. I would be more amenable, say like 2.5% or 3%, but 5% is too much. Thank you.
And on my comment on the preemption, Sitka is preempted, Juneau, Anchorage, and I believe this Fairbanks were grandfathered because they already had those rates in before the state wrote its preemption law, and so we are preempted.
Kevin?
Yes, thank you. Again, it does appear like the sponsors did a lot of work. My only concern is it just feels like more work was done into what we're going to use it for than how it's going to affect the business. And I'm all for what we're going to use it for. There's no question. That's awesome. My only concern is I don't like, have the sponsors talked to any of the marijuana company businesses in town at all?
I attempted to by email, but never got response back.
Okay, because I'll tell you that when I got on the assembly 3 years ago, I actually met with the woman who spoke. I'm sorry, Lisa? Michelle, sorry. I met with her and I sat with her for about 45 minutes when she explained to me all that she goes through, and as a business owner of this, especially with regard to the toll on just having to use cash to go, and the safety concerns and the expenses just to pay taxes, because you can't use electronic means. And so I didn't know this. I also didn't like that in this memo, you didn't list any of the other taxes that are due. Ms. Cleaver listed 20% state tax, 28 to 32% federal tax. And then on top of that, we would have possibly some are 6% sales tax plus another 5%. That's 59%. That's a well over half of their revenue. I know it's a profitable business, but I don't like that it's 5%. I don't like that you could have gone to the stores, and that I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. You could have gone over and talked to them. I did before this was even on the ballot. It was 3 years ago. I went and did that. And so I understand. I was going to mention about the medicinal use. I don't really know a lot about marijuana use because I don't use it much. I tried an edible once, but to be honest there. But so I was going to start saying that, make the argument about the medicinal portion, and then you said something about the CBD oil. It's my understanding, so that would nullify that, but I haven't researched that, because I know in other places where it's not legal, people get doctor's notes for medical marijuana, and they actually have the marijuana plant, the whole thing too. And I have a family member who is close to me, who has chronic pain, has for a majority of her adult life. She's been in several car wrecks, had 5 or more surgeries on her neck area, and she is always in a state of some level of pain. She couldn't work for 15 or so years, and she just recently was able to return to the workforce. And she was able to wean herself off the pain meds that she's on or was on. And she doesn't use CBD, but we've talked about it, or marijuana for pain management. And see, the problem is, because of the federal crackdown on prescription medication, doctors are very, very leery about prescribing. So an easy thing that you would do, a very good idea, is to use marijuana to help with these things. And so you have a lot of people in Sitka even who have pain beyond, it's a nonstop thing. And if we keep taxing, add another burden onto this market, it starts to incentivize people to just go to the black market. And then when you get to the point where these businesses can no longer, they say, well, is it worth all the effort? And you discourage that. And so then you could even see your revenues drop. Your projected 200 could be less than that. And so I feel like, yes, people do take marijuana for fun, but there are people who have serious issues that need help. And this is a very safe alternative. And I feel like it's basically picking on one industry. And then we say that we're going to help our children with it, which is wonderful. But it's not fair to say, well, because you don't like children if you don't, I mean, of course, who doesn't want to help our children? Of course we do. I think that's a great thing. I would have preferred if you had talked to the owners. I really would have. And I feel like the taxes that they already have is just tremendous. And I would have, yeah, I agreed, a less, maybe even 2.5 or something, 2 even, just to, get something, but 5% on top of all that they're already paying, I think is too much. And so I'm going to vote no on this.
Rebecca, did you want to say anything? Okay. I would just say that this is, again, not our call. It's going to the voters. I honestly, at this juncture, don't know how I'll vote for it. But that's because we're talking about a general vote. I don't have to say. I will say, when you're talking about pain, that I'm finding out that as you get older, it's just always there. But anyway, I don't have no problem pushing this forward to the next reading. And then, like I said, almost any semi-reasonable proposal I'll put forward to the voters. And like I said, I am not sure how I would vote for this if and when that comes to that point, but I don't have a problem letting it go to the voters.
Just to make one last, something that I guess I didn't put in, that Rebecca and I didn't mention in the memo, but is worth pointing out too. When the Marijuana Advisory Board put forward its final recommendations, it actually did recommend a retail tax or point of sale tax in its final recommendation. So part of that, developing this came out of following those recommendations too. So.
Okay. Jess?
Mr. Mosher,
No.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
No.
Ms. Hemshoot,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2117 shall move to second reading on July 13th.
Moving on to item, excuse me, so it's page, item I.
I move to approve the ordinance 2021-18 on first reading, amending Title 15 Public Utilities of the Sitka General Code by updating Chapter 15.06 Solid Waste Treatment and Refuse Collection to reduce the refuse collection rate for customers living within the harbor system.
Second.
And so, Kevin, do you want to give a little bit of an overview before we go to public comment?
No, I'm comfortable because we provided a pretty comprehensive look at it in the memo.
All right. So anybody from the public wish to speak to this? Okay.
Richard Ween. It's very interesting. Anytime you can reduce the cost to somebody here in Sitka, it sounds like a good idea. But some of the reasoning that was used in the memo was, well, somebody lives on a boat and there are fewer people, so they should be charged less since they're making less refuge. Well, the whole notion is that what about people who live in a house and they're a singleton or who are not making much waste either. So maybe we should have a sliding scale on the number of people who are producing that waste. Bottom line is that the people in the harbor have the ability to empty their waste every day. Whereas, for example, I can only do it once a week, and I am constrained by the container. So from a technical point of view, it's amazing how much waste somebody from the harbor can put in if they so decide. Another interesting thing that was in the memo is that people who live on islands only pay 29.08 fee because because they have to bring it in and they don't have refuse collection. So it's amazing how much the collection portion of the garbage is. And so my notion would be if you want to reduce the waste costs to everybody, well, if people don't want to pay that extra $30 in essence a month, then we should just be able to bring it down to the transport station. But I think that may be contractually not allowed. So we're kind of like stuck in that. But if you want to reduce it, it's fine. But the important thing is that it needs to be as fair as possible, meaning if you have somebody who's living alone, who is not producing much at all. Some weeks when I first got here, I didn't even bother putting the garbage out. There was so little. But the important thing is that it should be fair. And I see there's a lot of emphasis and movement for the go-getters on the ports and harbor to make these things happen. But those kind of things, especially as it relates to solid waste, needs to be applicable to all Sitka citizens. If the reason is because you're not making as much, then I think those people who don't make as much should also get a reduction. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, bring it back to the table. Kevin?
So that's exactly what this is all about. The monthly garbage rate for a small can would then equal the same. So a household has the option of getting a small can for, you know, the 96 gallon can as opposed to the larger, so that, you know, the liveaboards get the same rate essentially. So it puts it on par with a household that can produce less garbage or chooses to produce less garbage. The commission asked for us to consider it, and they actually asked for the assembly to consider it on 2 different occasions, providing public input during both of those occasions, and you know, this passed unanimously through them. I think it's a reasonable thing for us to consider. Anybody can, you know, take additional waste up to the transfer station at any time. You know, everybody gets afforded that same ability, and I think we're just trying to address a small inequity here within our garbage system within the harbors there.
Anybody else? I will say that I mostly was co-sponsoring this just to help Kevin out, but I agree with it. And just a side note, it's not 100% relevant, but everybody on an island has to pay for the pass twice because they don't give any place to take it. So like for me, I have to take it to my office so it gets paid for twice. If you're in the harbor system, you pay for it as a harbor user too. So anyway, I don't have I think this is fair, and it's a very small amount of money. Yes, sorry.
I think Assemblymember Nelson had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you? Valerie, did you have your hand up?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Good. Make you feel bad. All right, Jess.
Okay. Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Ms. Hemshoot, Ms. Nelson.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2118 passes to second reading on July 13th.
So I think this next one is going to probably take a little while. So let's go ahead and take our break 5 minutes early since we took it late last time, and we'll be back on the hour. All right, is everybody online? No. One. There's Valerie, Rebecca. The transcript is interesting sometimes. Got that. Rebecca, you there? Well, right. Well, we'll go ahead and at least get it read and hopefully she'll pop up. There she goes. Okay. We are up to item J.
I move to approve ordinance 2021-16 on first reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2022 Lincoln Street paving project.
Second.
Made and seconded. Do the sponsors want to talk about what their overview for the public?
Kevin, if you want to go, it was kind of your.
I'm going to go back to, it's pretty comprehensively laid out in the memo.
All right, then anybody from the public wish to speak? Okay.
I certainly agree, Richard Ween, as the person who's speaking at the mic. I certainly agree that any money that goes into infrastructure, et cetera, is a good thing. And what has not been said, I believe, is the complete movement of the $1 million from Norwegian to this project. I think that's correct. You'll correct me if I'm not there. So already we now have this appropriated. What's important to know is that the Lincoln Street project was already fully appropriated at one point. However, monies were diverted. There was, I think, $2.355 million in the budget for it. And monies were taken out, kind of take from Peter to pay Paul for the Peterson culvert. And then there was the Knutson Drive emergency repairs that had to be done. I have recalled from prior assembly meetings that that was a $1 million cost. And that story is unbelievable as a self-inflicted city wound. So that was $1 million. So you can see where money goes and how it can go unexpectedly. Now, the problem that I have with this going fully is that if it goes forward with the previously outlined plan, then I have difficulty with that design. And I had difficulty with that design from the very beginning. And I think that, again, when it looks like Public Works wants to do something, really wants to do it, they're right on it. But when you look to have them change or think outside their box, you know, there's inertia. And there's actually a formula for inertia in physics, so I could probably calculate it. The important thing here is that it's okay for the money to go there. And as a matter of fact, there's currently $1.6 million remaining in the Lincoln Street budget, and it needs another $813K. Bottom line is, I still don't like the plan, and I hope that this is just money appropriation and does not mean it is approving that plan, because it is not a plan for development for downtown. And that was the whole issue. How do we want our downtown to look? Because once you pave it, and it's just going to be a scrape and pave, they're just going to lift off, do some storm sewers, but that's going to be that way for 20 years. So thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to this? Okay, back to the assembly. John.
Yeah, thank you. If I could just throw a few quick things in here. I worked with assembly members Knox and Mosier on helping put this one together. And we started this out with kind of what's the goal? What are we driving at? And the goal was to put it into a capital project to address our infrastructure and something that also could serve tourism. And knowing that we have, you know, a larger number of tourists coming next year, this seemed to be a great opportunity to kind of hit both of those goals. Yes, we did have this project already budgeted, and things have changed since then. And the original plan was just a scrape and pave and change, you know, fix some sewer infrastructure. So the intent with this is we originally talked about putting it towards the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund. And the more we read into code, we found out that if it goes into the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund, it can only come out once per year. And that's in the budget cycle from the administrator's budget. Otherwise, if it comes out of that fund, it's considered an emergency appropriation, which would take 5 votes for that to pass. So the idea of moving this towards the Lincoln Street project, we are now doing an appropriation to a capital project that can carry over from fiscal year to fiscal year. And it gives us time to develop a more comprehensive project on Lincoln Street. So we've got this tourism master plan, or we're not calling it that anymore. I think it's the short-term tourism plan, I think is the name of it now. We've got this group working on some ideas on how to address the influx of tourists next year. And we could now, with having this money dedicated towards this capital project, we can take some of that input from that group and then bring forward a more comprehensive plan as we develop maybe a different budget or maybe a different plan for Lincoln Street. But now this kind of, I would say, protects this this appropriation somewhat. And to get moved to another capital project, it would require another appropriation, another vote.
Anybody else from the assembly wish to speak to it?
I think Mr. Leach pretty well laid it out.
Anybody online want to speak? Yeah, I really like the idea that we've got, it's a dual use. I mean, every single Sitkan will benefit from this and pretty close to every single tourist. So it's then, so while I know that this was not, these funds weren't earmarked or anything, I think it fits the spirit well. So anybody else? Then Jess?
Ms. Hemschuft,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier.
Yes.
Ordinance 2116 passes to second reading 5-0 for July 13, 2021.
Okay, moving on to new business, additional new business. Not sure
I
why we
move to
need-
approve resolution 2021-14 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for a rebuilding American infrastructure with sustainability and equity 2021 grant with the U.S. Department of Transportation for $6,464,800 with a 20% match commitment to the support the haul out infrastructure at the Gary Paxton Industrial Park.
Second.
Yeah. John, did you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, if I can talk about this one and then the next two, because these are all kind of they're similar grant applications in a similar process. So I'll just kind of speak generically here, but this one is for the haul out. This is the RAISE grant, which used to be called the Build grant. We've got quite the team working on this. You all know we have our lobbyist team there in DC. We still have a consultant on board helping us out since that person worked last year. We now have Melissa Henshaw working on it. We've got Public Works, lots of people providing a lot of information for this grant. We attended the debrief from last year when we were a finalist for this grant, and we got a lot of good information on what we could have done better. We've addressed those in there. And to get this moving forward, you know, to get the resolution, the support resolution here, we've provided essentially I'll call it a 90 to 95% solution. We're still kind of finalizing this application, but I wanted you guys to see the product as it is right now. This one specifically, 6.464 million requested in the grant, and the match funding would be just over 1.6 million for an $8,081,000 total. We've got some possible match funding. The first one is the Southeast Economic Development Fund, which has approximately 2.6 million available right now. And then some other ideas where we could use GPIP fund, maybe the general fund, but ideally we would focus on the Southeast Economic Development Fund for the match on this application. I won't go into the numbers on the other ones unless you ask me to, but it's in there in the memo. It says where the plan for the match funding is coming from. That's all I have.
Okay, anybody from the public? Okay.
Richard Ween. I'd like to thank Melissa Henshaw for the work on this. We're beginning to see fruit of her involvement within the city, especially as it relates to grant. The raise grant would be for $6.4 million, but there's a specific wording there. We have to have a commitment match of $1.6 million. So when we apply for this, we have to have that money literally in the bank. This is very important because there's a proviso that says previously incurred expenses cannot be included. So what this essentially does is it chills any development down at GPIP for the haul out for this season. And so, you know, that's fine if that's what you want, but you have to understand this is a $1 billion grant nationwide, and 50% to go to rural. That's $500 million that we're competing for nationally. And though I think our Sitka kids are great in baseball, I don't think that they're going to the Olympics to play at this particular moment, though I do wish them luck and hope they do. Bottom line is that we're going to lose a season, and we are not allowed to bill expenses. The other thing is that in the next item, it's also a rescue grant. And my notion is if we get one, does that eliminate us from the another? So I don't know what the rules are for that. Bottom line is that we really need to have that plan B, and we really need to get started on this, and we need to make choices. I don't know whether one is more probable to get, but I think the one that needs to be started this sooner is the haul out. And we have the seed money from the Southeast Development as well as other things which can do a few of the phases from the PMD or however they're planning to do it. So I really feel that this is a giant leap that we're taking, though if we get it, it's a wonderful thing. But if we don't, we've lost a season and we still have to face the haul out issue. So it's a conundrum, and happy voting.
All right, looks like we've got another taker.
Gary White with Gary Pax Industrial Park. And also the CETA director. As a CETA director, I support this moving forward. From working with the Gary Paxton board, last Thursday, the board did approve terms to bring to the assembly, or they approved, they recommended terms for you all to consider, and we're going to be bringing that to you guys on the 13th of July. But the kind of the goal is to continue to move forward with this private group to develop the haul out. But this is a very nice plan B to have, and also the ability to build off of what the haul out folks are proposing if they're successful in doing their development. So just want to put my support forward.
Thank you. Okay, back to the assembly.
I'll just mention that this is applying for a grant. It doesn't bind us to anything. Although if we do receive it, I think it would be wonderful.
Anybody else? Okay, I would agree with that. It does, if you don't ask, you don't get. Jess?
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Hemshoot,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
Resolution 2114 passes 5-0. First reading and final reading.
Okay, item L, I need a motion. You guys gotta do heavy duty tonight. I can't do it.
I move to approve resolution 2021-15 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for a Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity RISE 2021 grant with the U.S. Department of Transportation, USDOT, for $7,344,720 with a 20% match commitment to support the reconstruction of the port wall and crane at the Marine Service Center.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. And John, are you happy with what you said before? All right, then we will open up to the public.
Richard Ween at the microphone. This is for a total of $9.1 million. When you deal with our 20%, the city's committed amount of money is 1.8. So I'm sure in the grant, they have to show that we have the 20%. If we take both commitments, it's about $3.4 million that we have. And again, I'll remind you that the previously incurred expenses cannot be included. So it's not a question of asking and we're not obligated. What happens is we lose time. And we've heard at this assembly table time after time that time is money and things only get more expensive. So this is not a small thing. One of the interesting things, though, is if we commit $1.8 million for this, let's say we get it, and will we then be selling the Marine Service Center after this enormous improvement of property? Because I remember at the prior assemblies, this was a big discussion of talk to sell. So if this comes through and we fix it, I have to tell you, we're keeping it, as at least in my opinion, that we shouldn't make such an enormous capital investment and then allow this item, which is probably the only enterprise fund that makes money, slip through our fingers as it almost did previously. So again, happy voting. The prior item has a higher priority in my notion, and hopefully lightning will strike twice. But that lightning will cost the city $3.4 million.
Anybody else in the public? Back to the assembly.
I think the big thing about this piece of property for me is the fact that it's right now a pretty major liability for us. I mean, it's an incredibly valuable piece of waterfront property, but we cannot afford to repair it in its current state without some additional assistance. And I think it's really important for us to get there because, you know, if we turn this, you know, if we have to end up repairing this by putting riprap in front of the wall to keep it stabilized, to keep the shore from falling away, it's no longer a port serviceable spot. So I think any assistance we can get here is really, really important.
Anybody else? Jess?
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Hemshute,
She's got her thumb up.
and Mr. Knox.
Yes. All right, on
Okay,
to,
resolution 2021-25 passes first and final read 5-0.
on to item M.
I move to approve resolution 2021-16 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for a Rebuilding America Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity 2021 grant with the U.S. Department of Transportation for $7,344,720 with a 20% match commitment to support the reconstruction of the port wall and crane at the Marine Service Center.
Second.
Sean, do you want to add anything to this one?
I'll just add that this one is not a raised grant. It's still from the U.S. Department of Transportation, but this is the Port Infrastructure Development Program. And this one focuses on commerce and a tie to our transportation system, but still eligible under that program.
Okay. All right, anything from the public? Go ahead.
This is another grant for the Marine Service Center's wall and for a crane. And it is, the grant is for 7.3 million and our commitment is 20%. I think since the paperwork has been essentially done and we learned some lessons over the years, this is just a good betting strategy of putting in multiple grants. Maybe one of them will hit. So is it a good idea? You bet. And maybe the rescue grant will come to our rescue. But as far as this one, it's a different pot of money. So hopefully it will happen. So thank you. But again, it is a commitment of cash. Thank you.
Anybody else? And back to the assembly. Not seeing any, Jess? Or did you, sorry, Kevin, did you want to?
No,
Okay.
no, thank you.
All right, Jess?
I actually wanted to clarify, we have a clerical error in the motion itself. It should read to approve resolution 2021-16 on first and final reading, authorizing the municipal administrator to apply for the PIDP 2021 grant. And we have raise in there, so my apologies.
It's okay with the two more, the change the,
Sure.
Okay. All right, Jess?
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Hemshute,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
and Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 2021 passes 5-0, first and final reading.
Okay, we are on to item N. Get a motion.
I move to approve a 2-year lease between the city and borough of Sitka and North Pacific Seafoods for the Sitka Marine Service Center at 611 Catlean and authorize the municipal administrator to execute this document.
Second.
Okay, John, do you want to fill us in a little bit?
I'll give a quick history, but you probably remember we had one lessee at the Marine Service Center who was on a month-to-month term, and the intent is to a month-to-month is typically a carryover as you establish a longer-term lease. So we put out an RFP to establish a longer-term lease that my strategy is I wanted to have it coincide with the expiration of the other side occupied by a different lessee. So both will expire at the same time. And then we'll have some flexibility in our choices on how we want to approach a lease strategy in 2023. So this 2-year term will expire June 30th, 2023. I laid out the scores. We received 2 proposals, and that scoring is in the memo. And I didn't see any issues with the proposal. It was fairly straightforward, a competitive rate that was fairly close to what we were receiving before on the month-to-month term. So The lease is in your packet for review. I think it's around just under $12,000 per month lease rate. And then a guarantee to provide at least 10% of the floor space for public access. And the public storage rates are listed in the lease as well.
Anybody from the public? Okay.
Richard Ween. This is a 2-year lease between CBS and North Pacific Seafood for space at the Marine Service Center. The important thing here is that they will be giving $11,800 per month, and it's always good to have a tenant and to know that at least for the next 2 years of this lease that there will be funds coming in to service a building which requires constant care. I did have one question. No one will probably answer it in explaining the scoring system there and how the different scores related to, because Sitka Sound had an interesting idea, and I think they were interested in paying much less. And so, but it seemed like their score was higher. Maybe I missed that, but anyway, it's nice to have a tenant. Thank you.
Anybody else? Back to the assembly. Okay, not seeing any. Jess?
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Hemshute.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, we are on to item O. And I guess we'll start with the discussion portion. Do we need to have Amy up here?
It'd be very helpful if Amy could come up. She's much better explaining things than I am, so.
Thank you, Assembly members. Amy Ainsley, Planning Director. So at our May 25th meeting, we presented the response that we received from Sciatica and its partners to an RFP that CBS issued for the use and development of 4951 Halibut Point Road, which is a 17-acre undeveloped waterfront and CBS-owned property. The RFP was open from early December through early February, which was advertised locally as well as Juneau, Anchorage, and Seattle. The RFP was open to essentially all development opportunities and any proposals. The Sciatica response was our sole response. The response that we reviewed at our last meeting was for recreational tourism venture, which was one of the alternatives that was proposed in the No Name Mountain and Granite Creek master plan for this particular area. Upon reviewing the response as well as the lease terms at the May 25th meeting, the Assembly directed staff to renegotiate certain terms of the agreement or of the RFP response as presented. So I'll go through what those terms were, what was originally offered, what we countered with, and where we are now sitting in terms of those negotiations. So first and foremost was the annual lease rate. The RFP proposed an annual lease rate of $50,000. We countered with $70,000 based on a previous sort of ROM appraisal that we had on file, and also accounting for the sort of lower development impact that this particular proposal had. Sciatica and its partners countered at $60,000. So that's sort of our last offer that we received, was an annual lease rate of $60,000. There was no escalation proposed in the RFP. And so we asked for an annual CPI adjustment for the base lease rate, as well as the revenue sharing component. For Assembly members or for the public who may not recall, part of the proposal was to include a $4 per head revenue sharing piece that would come back to the city for every customer that visited the site. So we asked for that CPI adjustment on both the base lease as well as the revenue sharing. Sciatica countered with offering a CPI adjustment every 3 years which we felt the basis for was fairly firm, given that they have to provide sort of set 3-year pricing in order to sell the tickets through the cruise lines. But that escalation rate only applied to the base lease rate and not to the revenue sharing piece. Given that the revenue sharing piece is likely to be larger in terms of revenues for the city, given the projections that we have for customers or visitors to the site, that could be an issue from an inflationary standpoint. However, we were also reminded that a 10% increase in 10 years was a part of the RFP response. So that revenue sharing piece will increase by 10% once we're 10 years into the initial 20-year term. We were also asked to request an annual report. In order to facilitate the revenue sharing piece, the operators will need to provide us with customer numbers to ensure that we get an accurate revenue sharing piece. And so we added, as a part of that annual reporting, a request to report back on local employment numbers, which Sciatica was amenable to. On the zoning, the original RFP stated that either commercial or recreation zoning would be adequate for the proposal. We indicated a preference for recreation zoning. In their response, Sciatica and its partners pointed out that that recreation largely would work, but there are just a few items that are in the zoning code that may not fit perfectly with the type of proposal. So they requested that we process a zoning text amendment to make certain uses, and 3 in particular: amusement and entertainment, eating and drinking places, and outdoor amphitheaters, conditional uses in the recreation zone. And then Sciatica and its partners can then apply for those conditional use permits before they operate for the 2022 season. On the last piece, which was subleases, we wanted to clarify that any future subleases of the site would require assembly approval, as well as some sort of expected revenue sharing to be negotiated at the time of sublease. Sciatica wanted to clarify that their partner, Adventure Sitka, would be operating the site and would therefore be a sublessee, essentially right from the start as the proposed model. So they wanted to make sure that subleasing only applied to any operations above and beyond what Adventure Sitka had proposed in their proposal, which we felt was a fair representation of the RFP as presented. So where that leaves us for tonight is that staff would like direction from the assembly to either prepare a lease based on the terms as have been negotiated to this point, or to perhaps provide staff with terms for a final offer in response.
If I can, I was looking around, I'm not seeing, so when I read through this, the one deal breaker for me is that lack of escalation on the passenger fee, the $4. And while I could see giving them 10 years to get their feet under them, I think at the very least, we need to have something along the lines of 10% or the CPI, whichever is larger. And then a schedule for after that. That is, if it needs to be every 3 years, fine. But I absolutely think that could be a real deal breaker, because we don't know what's going to happen with inflation. 10% may be reasonable, it may not be. And so at least for me, otherwise, I mean, I can see at least going back and then we can go to a full vote on the whole thing. But I know I wouldn't vote for it without something like that. Sorry, John, or Valerie, both, or John, do you need to?
I just wanted to throw out, and I don't mean to interrupt, is that Mr. Potts is here. So if you want to give him the opportunity to explain that piece and what that means to them and why we settled on that, I'm sure he'd be willing to come up and speak to that item if you wanted to call him up for questions.
Rebecca, you had something there.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I think my question is for Amy. With the conditional use permits, I feel really stuck on this because I understand the need to be able to offer concessions or food or a salmon bake or whatever to visitors to the site. And so it's possible that I'm confused about this, but I thought that the property was at the very end of city services. So how can you operate a salmon bake without water? Or is there a plan to, if we give a conditional use permit, will they be able to operate what they're talking about operating?
The RFP outlined plans to be able to deliver water to the site. We did part of the original sort of back and forth on clarifying the terms on the RFP was mainly focused on sewer infrastructure, because there was sewer infrastructure, or at least in our approximation, kind of close enough by the site that code would require a hardline hookup to our sewer system as opposed to a vault toilet type system. The water did not fall under the same code requirement, and I believe that the plans in the RFP were to essentially kind of truck water into the site and then dispose of it through some sort of DEC approved method. But that's my recollection on water service. And then if the respondents wanted to clarify that for you, I'm sure they might be able to speak to that in a little more detail as well. But in terms of, did you have questions specifically about how the conditional use permit process would play into those operations, or just want to make sure I captured your question?
Yeah, I guess I'm getting the cart in front of the horse, because the planning commission and you would work through the parameters of the conditional use permit. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thanks.
Okay, so I actually have a question about the conditional use permit process. Normally, conditional uses don't come before the assembly. This would just be a stipulation within the lease that they would have to come back. So they would go in front of planning, zoning, and then come back before the assembly before approval. Is that the exact stipulation then?
Not necessarily. I would, at least the way I was imagining it playing out would be that you would, if you wanted to move forward with the proposal, you would direct staff to prepare a lease and an ordinance with that lease. We would bring those back to you for your approval. We would sign the lease, they would become the lessee, and then they would, well, in the meantime, we would process the zoning text change to add these uses as conditional to the recreation zone. And then the applicants could then, or the lessees in this case, could then apply for the conditional use permits through the planning commission.
So then at that point, none of the conditional uses would end up coming before the assembly for their final approvals. It would just go through planning and zoning as the process is currently laid out.
Correct.
For anybody else doing that.
Correct. And given that we would still be the property owner, we would still have to sign off on those conditional uses. We'd have to agree to that. So there might be some language perhaps in the lease that would speak to sort of broad support for those, but I'd have to defer to legal to see how we would want that referenced or structured in the lease itself. But or if there would be some other mechanism for that to come back to the assembly in some way. But generally speaking, a lessee would, if they have an executed lease, would be able to, with owner consent, apply for a conditional use permit, which wouldn't come back before the assembly.
Unless they were appealing.
Unless they were appealing a decline by the planning and zoning. I guess just my concern around that is that, I have a lot of faith in the commissioners. They do a really great job and represent the community really well. I think there may be some concern, though, that major improvements to that piece of property by non-elected, by appointed officials might be of concern to some community members to see that, some of those, if there are major improvements or major concessions made in a conditional application, that might need to come back to the assembly level.
Valerie?
The applicant or anybody else can appeal a planning and zoning decision for a conditional use permit to the assembly. And if they're not happy with the decision, they can appeal it to the Supreme, or not Supreme Court, our court here in Sitka for further adjudication. So it's not a given that if planning and zoning grants whatever is asked for, that it's rubber stamped. There are reviews if appropriate timelines are followed. Thanks.
And I would say that I suspect the planning and zoning will be significantly more stringent than the assembly will be, in my experience. John?
I think I might be saying the same thing that Mr. Knox was getting at, is that although the conditional use permit application may go through, if it involves a material improvement to the site that is part of our lease, as part of that lease, they would have to come back to the assembly to get the approval for that material improvement to the piece of property.
Anybody else? I guess, who did you say was here?
Mr. Potts, the CEO of Sciatica's.
Yeah, if he could come up, because like I said, I'm still pretty hung up on this lack of any kind of escalation for the daily or the average person. So if you want to come up.
Good evening, Assemblymen and women. Carl Potts, Sciatica Incorporated. If you don't mind, Assembly, I invited Chris McGraw up because he might be able to address some of the operational and development issues that were questioned. So with regard to the CPI, we had significant discussions with John and Amy and the staff. I think the point that I would like to make is that we're about to commit to spending significant amount of capital to develop this project. And but that's not the end of the story, because we will be spending a significant amount of marketing dollars to get the passengers off the cruise ships and as paying customers, not only for this project, but then they will be also spending money throughout the city in the other venues. So there's an inherent built-in adjustment. So the more passengers we have, the more dollars are going to be flowing through the project and to the city subsequently because of the per head fee. So that was my point to the city staff, is that we have already built in an inherent escalation into the pricing, because we will be spending our money, our marketing dollars, to incentivize the passengers to step off the ships and spend their money, on our project, and also throughout the rest of the community.
I don't want to get too much into a back and forth here, but I'm just really concerned that after 10 years, a 10% increase may be trivial. And because, again, we don't know what the CPI is going to do. I also see that there's nothing after that until the renew for another 10 years. And so I would really want to see some sort of protection for the city there, in that, I have no problem giving 10 years to build the business before we raise it. But if we do have to, instead of, just something simple of saying 10% or the CPI, whichever is greater. And it's probably going to be fairly similar, but then some sort of mechanism for after that. And if it's every 10 years, I guess as long as we're tied to the CPI, I don't have too much of a problem with that. Valerie, you wanted something? Say something?
I don't know about the other three that are attending the meeting tonight, but I don't have a problem with the lack of the escalation on the per passenger fee, because I think that we're addressing it by the increase in the annual fee. And yeah, who knows? Maybe the earth will end in 10 years. We can say no, and then, 50% of nothing is nothing, once again.
I'll.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Like, I say this a lot, but if I had to vote right now, we had to make a decision, I would say yes. I do think that you make some valid points. I mean, Sciatica and McGraw's, they have some valid points. They're putting a lot of cash in here. And it's not a guarantee, so they're taking a lot of risk. Our risk is minimal from a financial standpoint, other than if inflation skyrockets, then we don't make as much money. But if inflation skyrockets, we're going to have bigger problems. So I'm okay with voting yes, but I don't know what other members feel.
One of the questions that I had going into this in reviewing the RFP response had to do with how oftentimes the cruise industry sells those shore excursion packages. And from my understanding, there's oftentimes a push right after they leave home ports or, the origination ports to start selling packages right away. Just get people on board with what they're going to do so that they can kind of plan out their days and know exactly what they're going to do when they get to port. With that, oftentimes in the past, that was an opportunity. No, opportunity is probably the wrong word, really, but that was a way for the cruise industry to not have to remit sales taxes into municipalities. Because a lot of municipalities don't have a way to collect or enforce that collection when a boat is out to sea in international waters or other places like that until they actually enter into a municipal boundary. The numbers that you provided with the revenue benefits to the city of Sitka, are you taking that into account, or are we just making some assumptions that the industry is going to be remitting back to municipalities? How do we reconcile that, or how do we explain it anyway?
So the cruise lines themselves don't pay any sales tax. Adventure Sitka is the entity that pays sales tax. So you have a net rate, which is Adventure Sitka's rate to the cruise ship per passenger. Then the cruise ship marks that up and sells it. So let's say $50 is Adventure Sitka's rate. The cruise ship sells it for $60. Adventure Sitka will pay the 6% sales tax to the city and borough of Sitka on that $50 for every passenger that we sell a ticket for, no matter if they buy it online when they book the cruise, they buy it when they're sailing through Canada, or if they buy it once they get to Sitka. Every person that goes on that site will pay the sales tax.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so I guess, does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to direct the municipal administrator to prepare a lease based on the negotiated terms as presented in the planning director's memo dated June 15, 2021.
Second.
It's been made and seconded. I guess any comment from the public? And I guess you guys are the public. You got 3 minutes.
I'll make it short. First, a brief history lesson. We've been at this a long time, or the past year seems long by any standard. We've worked hard, Chris and I have, and those involved in our project. The city staff has worked hard on through the RFI process, through the RFP process, and then the post evaluation, and certainly the assembly members, and we do greatly appreciate that. But rather than dwell on the past, I want to dwell on the future. And a year from now, we're hoping that we will have cumulatively about 400,000 or so people stepping off the boats and onto the shores of Sitka. The year after that, and the year after that, more and more. A rising tide is going to lift all boats in Sitka. This is a good project, certainly for us financially, or we wouldn't be involved It's good for the city. Economically, we think it's a fantastic opportunity for the city of Sitka and the citizens of Sitka. More importantly, or I should say equally importantly, we believe that from a cultural authenticity and integrity standpoint, it's fantastic. It presents an opportunity to develop a project that's true to the city of Sitka, true to the history of the Sciatica people, and it will provide a legacy and an opportunity for this community to chart their own course. The last thing I'll say, the city assembly members, is that as Dr. Ween had mentioned, time is money. So this project, if we had done it a couple of years ago, would have been far less expensive. Pushing it off even a few weeks runs the risk of missing construction targets and being ready for the 2022 cruise season. So I certainly hope that given the amount of hard work that we have put in, that the city staff has put in, that the assembly has put in, that we can continue to move forward and get this project underway as soon as possible. Thank you.
Anybody else in the public? Let's just speak to this. Thank you, guys.
Deal. And I know this is I heard Ms. Ames Ms. Hemshoot is know whether there's something important or a matter of information.
My screen is coming in and out. I don't know if Ms. Nelson's having the same problem, so I don't know what the issue is, but I'm listening as carefully as I can to everything you're saying.
And is if you deal, Ms. Ainsley was talking about the well, to me, Dr. Keller's home by Whale Park was listed at 2.4. Now, the important thing is that the lease rate was based on a static number of 4.5%. This is prime real estate, et cetera. So what you're saying is Midtown Manhattan has the same lease rate as some. If any, by the way, I believe they've taken like basically food and fuel out of the CPI calculations. Is to miss an opportunity. If you think that in 10 years to get 10%, that goes from $4 to $4.40. Appropriate. It's just one thing after another. We had a good of the meeting about over tourism. You know that the Harbor Point is going to segue and trajectory into cat leave. People should come to Sitka just to zip line. That's not culture. And I think having a clam bake is not culture either. And by the way, they're talking about looking at title. But think of all those people, thousands upon thousands of people. Imagine them out in the tidal pools in front of the Totem Park. I mean, you don't want all these people out there. We at the amounts of money they're giving us, it really is not that spectacular. The future is unknown, and it's commercial real estate. If you look at Sciatica, they developed Alice Island. Parking lot, and they did very well. And so I do believe that we have other opportunities here to preserve Sitka as it should be. And we need to consider that. Don't be lured by easy.
Bring it back. Anybody else from the assembly want to speak to it? Kevin?
Yeah, I understand what the last member of the public said about inflation, and what Tor said is that is a concern. I don't know the future. We can't control it. We are making $0 on there right now. And so we're already going to get a base rate that is going to be inflation proof. I would prefer an inflation proofed a per passenger fee inflation proof. And I worry about after 10 years having it raise 10% because it just seems kind of random. But I think that the fact that they're going to be bringing a lot of people to town, and it will flow. And there is a timing issue with getting all these things done. So I'm voting for it. If it fails, I don't think it means it's over, because we can still continue with this discussion item and renegotiate.
So actually, I had is the path. If I totally understand and sympathize with the fact that if this doesn't start moving forward, costs are going to rise dramatically for making it happen. But if we do not move this forward in this particular reading, what's the next path?
I want to clarify your question. If it doesn't move forward under these terms, the next path would be taking some guidance from the assembly and renegotiating terms where we're going to stretch that timeline out as the proposers mentioned, and the risk is missing the construction window and the possible influx of tourists next year.
So it's going to be a benefit to our revenue structure, although this many more people is going to come with some significant costs to the city. It worries me to see this kind of jump, a 1-year jump, even if COVID wasn't a factor in this last summer, a jump like this would, be really significant. That a very drastic change of our quality of life. On the other hand, this particular proposal helps defray it as well. I mean, there's a lot of sides to this coin, unfortunately, and it's a really, really tough decision, I think. There are a number of people who are very supportive of this, And there are a number of people in this community that are very against seeing these kinds of numbers of people come into town. We're not stopping these kinds of numbers coming into town if we don't do this, or if we don't provide opportunity for them. I really and in particular, Adventure Sitka and the McGraw family have the best interests of Sitka in heart, because they are our community here. They live here. They are a longstanding family within this community. And I really hope that they're looking for every opportunity to make this as best it can be for the entire community. Looking for every innovative way that they can to make this good for all of us as best they can. It's not going to be good for 100%, but I've really grappled with this one. And, you know, I guess I would love to see, you know, the best possible outcome for the city of Sitka and for our community.
I just wanted to say that there have been extreme difficulties with the audio and the video portion cutting out. So I hope if, sorry, I've got my TV on to get audio. I just hope that I get an opportunity to vote on this. Thank you.
Rebecca, did you want to say something?
For the public
We
to
haven't
bear
got
in
you,
mind.
Rebecca. What?
It's on our end. Grant's trying to figure it out.
I'm sorry, Rebecca, we can't hear you. Try it again, Rebecca. Hear us?
Rebecca, try
Can
again.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. I just very quickly want to point out it's important for the public to remember that we put out this RFP for recreation or development to be able to develop housing. We had no responses to developing housing there. And from everything I'm hearing from planning and people on the ground, it's not a property that could easily be used for housing. And if it could be used for housing, it would be extremely high-end housing. So for that reason, I would like to see something done with this land. So I'm a yes vote tonight. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, but the lack of escalators is a deal killer for me. Absolutely. I think, you know, if we had some sort of a caveat in there that if we are, if the CPI is significantly more than 10%, I could live with it, some sort of protection from that. But that's a really long time to go without escalation, without some protection. And, you know, we can't control how many people come, but they're coming whether this is going or not. And so, you know, I think this could be a fairly simple fix, but I really don't like, I mean, as other people have alluded to, there's a lot of people who are really against this for some reasons that we can't control. But at the very least, I want to say we got the best deal we could and we're protected as much as we can. So without something in there for that, I'm afraid I'm a no vote.
Can you make an amendment or make a motion to have that negotiated in?
I'll tell you the truth. I guess I would ask the gentleman from Sciatica and Howard Point Marine if they would be willing to get to if they can be willing to put in some sort of protection. I mean, and I don't want to, I'm sorry to put you on the spot right here, but that's.
Can I, do you mind if I jump in? I think Well, a couple things I want to mention. First one is I want to make a comment. I don't want it to sound opinionated at all, but I had some discussions with the cruise ship industry recently, and some things to keep in mind is that we're a half-day stop for most of those cruises. They've got Ketchikan, they've got Juneau, and they've got Skagway, and most of them go on 3.5 stops, and we're the half. They come here because of the customer experience. When those customer experience ratings are high, they keep coming here, they spend dollars here. If that customer experience rating starts to come down, they'll stop coming to Sitka and they'll find another, what is it called, Icy Point Strait or some other location to go to. And you know, I don't want that to sound threatening, but if you have large numbers coming in to a privately owned dock, and those passengers don't have a place to go, yes, they are not traveling for zip lines. You know, they want the Sitka experience. That's why they're coming to Sitka. But if there's no way to disperse them at all, I think the risk is that you risk losing that half-day stop. So I think at some point you want to try to keep that customer experience rating high with the cruises. On the second issue about asking the proposers if they'd be amenable to the change, I would just offer an opinion that one of the motions there was to have us go back and attempt to renegotiate terms if you give me the guidelines that that's what you would like to do. But the risk you run is that the proposer may withdraw their proposal as well. So I know it's tough to negotiate at the assembly table, but if you'd like me to go negotiate that with them, I could entertain that motion and do that. But I would personally recommend against negotiating here at the table. Brian, do you have any input to that?
Other than I agree, nothing.
Well, I mean, I don't know what I'm not sure, I haven't counted the votes yet here, but I mean, I'm only one vote, and if you guys think it's okay as is, but like I said, I just think we're really exposed with that. And I guess what I would say is we vote on this, and if it fails, we'd ask you to renegotiate. Because that's what, if we had a motion to go renegotiate that, that's the same, has the same effect. So, sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah, I should have looked this up, but I just was thinking CPI is generally around 2 after 10 years. The 10% is not that far off from, you know, I want to allow them to get started and then start making those adjustments. And so I wasn't that concerned with the 10%. So you're saying that the average of 2% per year as an escalator would be a much higher number than 10% after 10 years, basically. That's
they announced last year was 5. So, I mean, if it stays 2%, yeah, we're cool. But if it doesn't, we're not, we're exposed. And that's all. I'm sorry. I'd say if you guys, if the vote fails, we can ask to go back and renegotiate. So. Jess, unless somebody, what? Oh, I'm sorry, Valerie, go ahead.
I'm going to say if the vote fails, I won't be in favor of your inflationary factor. And I think that you are one vote that wants it. Maybe the 4 of you think that that's what has to be, but I don't want to take the risk of losing what I feel is a good proposal. So thank you.
That's fine. Sarah, or sorry, you have a sign. This is Jess.
Sorry. So the motion is to direct the municipal administrator to prepare a lease based on the negotiated terms as presented in the planning director's memo dated June 15, 2021. So Mayor, Mr. Christensen,
No, excuse me, no.
Ms. Hemshute,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
All right, we are on to reports. Well, yeah, we'll just get pushed through reports. I don't have any as mayor. I did go to. I guess so, yeah. Oh, wait. That's not what my thing says. Oh, that's fine. I was going by my cheat sheet here. All right. Persons to be heard, any matter.
Richard Ween, you think I'd miss an opportunity for 180 seconds? One thing that from a philosophical point of view, enlightenment is when the wave realizes that it is the ocean. Moving on to substantial issues, we need to preserve the allures of Sitka. That's why we have such a high rating. And if we start to dilute that, our rating will go down. And I can actually see the trajectory here. We also should not be bullied by the cruise lines who threaten a one-day, half day. I say if they don't like it, well, hey, whatever. Just because they want to bring in 400,000 people, which is more than we've ever had, I think that is problematic. It should be interesting to note that Juneau turned down the $2 million that Norwegian Lines earmarked for them. We took it, and I think it was a good idea, but I invite the Assembly to Google it and hear what the debate was on why they turned down the $2 million. The question for Ms. Hemshute, well, no, I answered it before about, well, only one person for recreation put in, and there was no housing. It depends how you ask the question. This was for a full development, and to do a full development of 18, 20, whatever houses is a different deal than doing individual lots, which is the way, the model of Sciatica and how it turned out. I have to tell you that I found it interesting, and I'm sorry to quote you, Mr. Christensen, but you had said in one of the other issues that it's not our call, it's going to the voters. And it resonated with me because I remember when Sitka Community Hospital was for sale, that was never an issue. It was only the assemblies, and it was kept at the assemblies. And I just have this is something that that is important not to go with this. In the Iliad, it was asked of Achilles about him wanting to be remembered, and that is called Aristai within the Greeks, and it is your performance in war. And I can tell you, the assembly, I hope, will look back and pat themselves on their back, but I think that this will be a decrement and a movement towards seasonalization here in Sitka. And I think that is a very bad thing, and you need to think twice because you won't be remembered well.
Anybody else? All right, now reports. Well, I guess as deputy mayor, I went to the planning and zoning is still working on the short-term tourism plan, and they're putting real work into it. And I think we owe them a pizza or something when this is done, or something stronger. Administrator.
Thank you. A couple quick things. We have a municipal engineer that's been hired. His name is Michael Schmetzer. He's from Fairbanks. He should be showing up soon. We've also hired a controller, Denise Salter. We took her from BHA, so we lost Cliff Richter. So we took something from them. So we're very excited about that. I'd like to go over the coffee with the administrator. That was something I tried to start up last year, but COVID hit and we locked everything down. So it's probably not the best to get in groups and have coffee together. So that's started back up. We had our first one last week. Learned some things, some really interesting ideas from the community. There were still a few that I didn't get a chance to speak with. And I wanted this to be a very laid back, we can talk about baseball if you want to. It's just a chance to have a cup of coffee and chat. So to be able to chat with some of those individuals that may not want to speak up here at the assembly table or even in that setting, I think I'm going to go back to, instead of one large table, I'll make it more like a cocktail hour, and I won't confirm whether or not we have cocktails there, but we'll have coffee, and I'll probably go from table to table or just talk to smaller groups, so I give everybody the opportunity to speak up. But that is on every third Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. here in Harrigan Hall. It lasts for about 2 hours. Thanks.
I like the cocktail tower idea. Greg Bourbon. Attorney, excuse me. Sorry, Brian.
Earlier this week, city employee Will Hanbury passed. Will worked in the same hall right down from me. And I've worked with him or by him for the last 5 years that I've been working here. I actually happen to know him and his family. They were part of the Japonski Island crew, so I've known of the Hanburys for over 55 years. Every morning, Will would walk by and say, "Good morning, Brian," to me, and we would occasionally speak. Will, it was a pleasant and kind person, and there's a lot to be said for pleasant and kind people in our world. Rest in peace, Will Hanbury.
You're here. Liaisons? Okay, can I get a motion?
Second.
All in favor? All right, we are adjourned.